Welcome to The Human Experience, a podcast about the stories we live out every day and the importance of championing the vulnerability and courage of the storyteller. I'm your host, Jennifer Peterkin, and it was through my own lived story of experiencing domestic violence that this podcast was created. By traveling the globe and interviewing each guest in person, I am convinced now more than ever that stories have the power to change the world. You can join our community of storytellers by subscribing, leaving a rating and review, signing up for my newsletter, following me on Instagram, and more. Thank you for being here. In a world full of noise, to listen with intention is an act of resistance. Episode 62 of The Human Experience is Natasha's story. Natasha spent the first 13 years of her life in Pakistan, where her father is originally from. Situations beyond their control would force Natasha and her family to move from Pakistan to the UK, where she currently lives with her husband and children. Because of her move at such a critical age, Natasha spent years feeling isolated and struggling with her self-esteem, often turning to social media for validation and friendship. But Natasha's desire for connection and her love for people would see her getting her master's degree in social work and creating a beautiful career helping families and children. Eventually, Natasha became a mother to her own children, and as it so often does, her journey from pregnancy into motherhood would shift her life once again. This episode was recorded in Manchester, England. Natasha.
Hi.
Hi. It's so nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too.
In person. So we are in Manchester recording right now, which is amazing. I got in here yesterday, walked around the city a little bit, so it was fun. But you're not originally from here.
I'm not at all. I'm originally, when people ask me that question, I have to kind of take a step back and think, like, where am I from? Because I was born in the UK, but then I spent 13 years of my life in Azad Kashmir, which is a part of Pakistan. And then I moved to the UK when I was 13. So when people ask me that question, it's a little bit tricky, I guess. So I spent 13 years of my life in Azad Kashmir in a small town called Mirpur. And then I moved to the northeast of England. So I spent the remaining few years of my life in a place called Jarrow, which is in the northeast of England.
Okay.
So make what you want to from that, I guess. So I'm from here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah. I mean, very big distance between the two, right?
Yes.
So I'm assuming your family's from there.
Yeah, so
Kashmir.
my family's from Kashmir, yeah.
And so you were born here, but then pretty much immediately moved?
Yeah, so I think I was about 2-3 months old when we moved to Azad Kashmir because my dad's from there. Okay. So my dad's family was there. So my mum, who's a mixed race, she kind of wanted me to learn about the culture and the language. So we spent 13 years over there. So I guess that's kind of like ethnically, that's where we're from.
Yeah. So I've never been to Pakistan. What is it like? What's the culture? How was it growing up there for you? Did it feel did it feel like home for you?
Oh, absolutely. I didn't know any different. Yeah. It was everything that I knew. It's got such a rich culture. And in particular, the reason why I emphasize on Kashmir is because it's quite different to Pakistan in terms of we have this really strong kind of connection with not family, but extended family. So highs and lows in life, the entire tribe comes together. The food obviously is incredible. So lots of different flavors, salt and spice, everything nice. Yeah, it was just beautiful. And what was unusual about me growing up was I'm an only child. And in like South Asian communities, or even my own family, that's unheard of, really. You know, we come from large families. Yeah. So being an only child was very unusual. And obviously being a daughter of a mixed race mum was unusual because we kind of spoke in English at home. And then it was unusual, but the family was so big that I never really felt that I didn't have siblings.
Yeah.
You know, there was lots of cousins and lots of, I would say it was a very, very rich upbringing in terms of best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. I would love to. I mean, my goal is to go everywhere, so I would love to go.
Yeah, I can hook you up with some connections.
Oh, fabulous. Let's do it.
Yeah. But even the landscape, the language, obviously the religious element of it as well. It's just like a different world, I guess.
Sure.
In comparison to like the Western countries and the Western world, it is entirely different.
Well, and I think that's the thing, right? Like when you talk about being cross-cultural and the intersection of that, it's really, there is such a divide between East and West.
Yeah.
And not even a divide in like a purposeful way, although it probably is. It stems from that. But I think even nowadays, it's like two separate worlds exist.
Yeah.
And even just the way that we think about things is so different. So for you to be straddling these two cultures pretty evenly, I mean, you spent like half your childhood, more than half your childhood in Kashmir, and then you move and have to kind of do an about face and switch up how you think about things, how you receive.
Massively.
Yeah.
And I think especially because, I mean, I now, you know, being 35 and kind of reflecting on my life, I think I have best of both worlds. I feel very, very fortunate that I call myself like a cocktail of East and West.
I love it.
I genuinely see myself as a cocktail of East and West because I feel like I've got both influences. Hence why the question, where are you from? Oh, I'm not quite sure because I'm best of both worlds, really. But yeah, I think when I came here, interestingly enough, I was very much the minority. I was the only person from an ethnic background in my school when I was 13. So it was a huge shock to the system because I was learning everything from scratch in terms of kind of the sense of humor, the popular culture, everything. It was all brand new to me.
Yeah. That's a big thing anytime in your life. But at 13 years old, I imagine that was really, I imagine you internalized a lot of that.
Absolutely, yeah. And we know when we think about the culture in Kashmir, it's entirely different in terms of the weddings, the funerals, things like sleepovers was never a thing. For me, growing up, I never really listened to any Hollywood or English music. I grew up listening to Bollywood, watching Bollywood. You know, that was kind of everything that I knew. So when I came here and people were listening to different music, watching different things, there's a massive chunk that I kind of missed out on because, you know, I was in Kashmir.
Yeah.
But it's really beautiful though, because I feel like that part of my journey, I really helped people understand what it was like growing up in Kashmir. I feel like everyone has kind of a reason to be here. And I think for me, just making those new connections and informing them about a different country and a different culture, it was quite nice.
Yeah. I imagine, you know, you're able to bring a sense of a knowledge to people that have never experienced anything outside of their own bubble too, which can be really damaging because we can start to believe that everything outside of our bubble is scary and like not anything that we would want to experience ourselves. And so to be exposed to different things is the best learning experience we can ever have for ourselves. I mean, I think it puts us heads and tails. You know, I think you having the experience that you had just puts you in a certain way, just like so much farther along.
For
right?
sure. Because you have to be like street smart. You have to, because again, when I was growing up in Kashmir, there was a massive influx of refugees from Afghanistan. So as a child, obviously Pakistan or Azad Kashmir is one of the third world countries. So in terms of poverty, so I've seen the highs and lows of people's lives in terms of the rich people living in a massive mansion next to a tiny little mud hut, and refugees and their journeys. So I feel like I was exposed to a lot for a 13-year-old in terms of, I guess, the real sad part of life that maybe certain people from other parts of the world aren't exposed to. Like at 13, coming from a culture when funerals happen, it doesn't matter if you are 2 or 20 or 80, everybody goes. And it's an experience that in a Western world, you don't have that experience. Whereas I had seen it all. I had seen extreme poverty. I had seen, I was there at every funeral of extended family. So I feel like that's a lot for a child to take in, especially at such a young age. But I think that gives you a sense of resilience along the way as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it gives you a totally different perspective on life because, moving from east to west, the Western world, maybe children haven't been exposed or like families haven't been exposed, but I would venture to say a lot of people in the Eastern world have, right? And so it's really, again, that divide of the way that we live is so different. But there is such value and power in the tradition and the culture and, what it has given you and what it has allowed you to, your perspectives to kind of form into, and then even moving into the Western world and seeing, hey, like I've had a totally different upbringing and now I kind of have to find myself in this space, but what I have walked through prior to this is now informing who I am. Yeah.
You've put that so beautifully because it's so true. I think the empathy, the communication skills, the kind of cultural knowledge, I feel like I, in some ways, added value to the Western world. Because I remember when I first started school, I think I was in year 8 or year 9, and someone said, "Oh, so is your the color is your blood red as well?" And I was like, "Yeah, like we're the same. Like, yes, there's some on surface things are very different,
sure,
but when you get down to the human level, we're all the same. Same feelings, same emotions, same everything." So there's something quite beautiful I find about kind of integrating and kind of mixing and matching kind of a bit both the cultures, really.
Yeah.
There's something quite beautiful about it.
I agree. And I, as somebody that has obviously been born and raised in and lived in the Western world, I am so there is a part of me that envies the holistic nature of the Eastern cultures that I have learned about, and I've very limited knowledge, but of course there's a tension in everything, right? And nothing is all good or all bad ever anywhere. But having met people and trying to learn and experience new things, I just think there's such a beauty in the holistic nature of your culture. Like there is a, excuse me, there's just such a value on humanity in terms of, from my perspective, at least from my perception, in terms of like, when you're talking about, even as children, you're walking through these things and it doesn't matter what age you are, whatever. To me, that just says something about the value in everybody being a human being, no matter what age they are. There's a part of you that has to grow up faster.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's also maybe a dignity in that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So, we are protected as well, but also you are very much a part of Like in terms of, but then again, in terms of decision making, they were, a child in the East, or at least from my experience, you wouldn't necessarily be part of the decision making of the process. However, when we do things together, we all pitch in, whether that's at weddings or family gatherings, or, because growing up, a lot of my childhood, it was all about family. We were all just always together, doing things together. There was no, and when the elders, so like first generation, second generation, we'd all just be together, and there was a sense of like unity and togetherness about it.
Yeah.
It was really quite beautiful, actually. And over time, I guess it's changing because there is that influence of the Western world and people. I think life's become a bit fast paced anyway. But going back to like the 90s, living in Kashmir, it was all very basic. The electricity used to go out, and when the electricity went out, so we'd all be outside. I remember growing up, we had dogs, we had peacocks, we had ducks, we had all kind of animals and birds, and we'd all come out, and when I look back now, I think, gosh, like my children growing up in the West are going to miss out on that entirely, that Eastern influence.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's something really, really quite beautiful about that.
Yeah. Before we started recording, we were talking about you have a podcast, and your motivation was, or a lot of your motivation was to kind of share the stories, share the things that you have known, and to be able to pass it down so that it doesn't get lost. And I really resonate with that. So my and obviously it's very different, but my grandfather was a second generation in the United States. His mother came over from Italy.
Okay.
And they grew up in South Philadelphia, and, very poor Italian immigrant family upbringing. He was one of 5 children, and they just stuck together in like a way that I wouldn't understand, right? Because I haven't been through the same things. And I remember growing up being close with my grandfather, being close with my grandfather's siblings. Like I knew my great aunts and uncles, and as a result, I knew their families, and we would get together. It wasn't often, but there was twice a year that everybody would get together, once in the summer and once at New Year's. And I just remember, even as a child, feeling like there was something so special about this, right? I didn't know anybody else that did it, and I didn't know my other side of the family didn't do that. I didn't know my second cousins and my whatever, but I still have relationships with my second cousins today. And, my grandfather has since passed, and most of his siblings have since passed as well. But I really resonated with what you said, because I feel the same way. Like there is just something that is now lost because they're not here anymore. And they're not here to carry that anymore. And so there is such beauty in the togetherness and the fullness of family and community, whatever family is to you, kind of thing. So yeah, I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. And I think what's beautiful is that cross kind of section in terms of we're all different yet the same. It all kind of, there's still pockets of communities that are still doing same things. Yes, we've clearly come away from that. But what's beautiful is that we're having these conversations now, and someone somewhere out there is going to be listening, and they'll be resonating with it, and they will be reminiscing about their past and the kind of the nostalgia. And I think that's what's beautiful about talking about these things and carrying their memories and their values as well within us.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a reason that we as human beings
are drawn to story and have always been drawn to story. I mean, every civilization that we know of has in some way or another passed on story. So I just, it is what makes us human in a lot of ways, I think.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
So what brought you back to England?
So at the time, my dad was working in Azad Kashmir and things were quite tense between Pakistan and India. There was conflict going on and my dad was quite close to the border where there was a lot of kind of war-torn activities, let's just say, was going on. And my mum was really fearful of my dad's life and kind of the anxiety of, is he going to return? Is he going to be okay? And at that point, my grandma, so my paternal grandma, had passed away. So I guess that the huge reason as to why we were there in the first place was kind of gone. Yeah. So my mum was thinking, you know, I think it's time that we go back. You know, Natasha's education, you know, in the West, the education is somewhat better. She's going to have better opportunities. So we decided to pack everything up. And at 13, it was just me and my mum at the time that came with 4 suitcases and no idea where life was going to take us, basically, at that point.
Wow.
Yeah. I still remember. I remember at 13 coming to Manchester Airport, actually, with 4 suitcases and not knowing where life was going to take us. And so we stayed with my grandma for a bit, and my mum, who's an amazing woman, managed to secure a job and we got a council house. And I remember people saying to her, at this point I hadn't seen the house, but I remember one of my mum's cousins saying to her, gosh, I wouldn't even put animals in that house. Like, what are you doing? And mum was like, no, we'll make it home. It's cool. So me and mum used to travel up and down. It was like a half an hour walk with loads of things, and we redecorated the house, and they still lived there, my mum and dad. And
wow.
Yeah. So I think when I look back, actually, gosh, it was quite a hard journey. And, you know, I've not spoken about it clearly ever in depth to someone. So it's quite emotional, if I'm honest, because it was a big deal.
I imagine. I mean, it's moving your whole life.
Yeah, so we moved like in, I want to say, March 2002. And I started school quite soon after. But yeah, me and my mum were kind of here together getting through things. The good thing was that while I was in Kashmir, I used to travel to the UK quite frequently. So I had somewhat of an idea of what to expect. So it wasn't an entire shock to the system.
That's good. Otherwise, I imagine it would have been really difficult and just even more difficult. But it's hard because, you know, on top of culture shock, that's not the only thing that you're going through.
No, absolutely
right?
not.
You're in a new area, meeting new people. That would have happened no matter where you moved. Your dad's not with you. You're trying to make a new house a home. You know, there's a lot going on there, I imagine.
Yeah. But also being 13, your hormones are all over the place. Your friendship groups are no longer, you know, a phone call away. It's more like letter situation back then because, you know, don't think we did have the internet.
No.
Back then, right?
We're the same age, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, so there was no MSN.
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet. I think we were like maybe 3-4 years away from the MSN world.
Yeah.
So that was completely lost at this moment in time. You know, at 13 coming here, that was completely gone. And I wasn't the most academic of students anyway. I was a bit of a mischievous student who liked to chat. And I think I did that more so when I moved to the UK because I wanted to be the class clown and I wanted to fit in and I wanted to make a point to say, hey, I'm here.
Yeah. Establish your place.
Yes, I spent a lot of time in corridors, being kicked out of classes. But when I look back, I think, yeah, of course you did. You were 13, like trying to fit in, to a new place, finding your own feet, finding your own tribe and your own people, whilst educating other people as to who you are, where you come from, what you represent.
Yeah. I mean, that must be such a exhausting piece of the puzzle as well.
When I look back, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure, trying to kind of fit all the jigsaw puzzles together.
Do you still feel like you're straddling the line of cultures? Do you feel like you are, did you feel like you belonged?
For sure, yeah. Yeah. And I think I felt that because I think it really helped with my mum being mixed race. And even though I was so young, I was quite aware of my surroundings. And because I was an only child, I had a really strong relationship with my mum. So we were quite open in terms of having those chats and discussions. Mum was mixed race, so we spoke in English. So speaking in English wasn't a big deal as such.
Yeah.
Obviously, the dialect. Have you ever been to Newcastle?
No.
Okay, so when you go to Newcastle, the Geordies are really hard to understand.
Okay.
So that was challenging, trying to understand the dialect. They've got a really strong accent. So that was difficult, but we soon got used to it. But no, I wouldn't say so. I must say, again, I am quite fortunate in that I was quite resilient from the offset. So I just made sure that I picked up best of both worlds.
That's amazing. I think that speaks a lot to your character and who you are and not that it would have been bad if you had struggled. It would have been completely understandable. But I think that is really special.
It is.
That you found your place in both worlds and that you felt like you belonged in both worlds. Because you do, right? Like that's the reality.
Yeah.
It's a lie that we don't belong, right? Or that we're not supposed to be in spaces.
But I must say, I think having open and transparent communication is absolutely a huge part of that, and those human connections. Again, I think I've been fortunate enough to have that. So I'm a social worker by profession, so I'm very much into kind of the attachment theory and a secure attachment base. And I sometimes wonder that we're having a secure attachment base in terms of my mum and dad, the extended family, it gave me that solid foundation to be able to have the resilience to deal with things at 13.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. I think I struggled with friendship groups for a long time. It took a long time to establish where I belonged. I don't think maybe it was a little bit of like trying to figure things out, but I think it really helped with being confident and I think in terms of confidence and self-esteem, for sure, I think it helped having that solid foundation to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think we can't leave out the fact that age does play a part too, right? Like at that age, we are all questioning who we are, where we are, all of it. So, that does happen regardless of moving across the world or not.
Yeah.
So how long until your dad was able to join you?
Oh, touchy subject, Yeah. So I didn't realize, but I clearly, on reflection, suffered a little bit with kind of abandonment issues because he wasn't around for quite a few years when I think about it. I've clearly blocked it out, but I would say from 13 till about, I want to say 18, 19, he was in and out. He was traveling backwards and forwards. And I think that's a really big deal. I think I really was at that age where, excuse me, Mum worked 12-hour shifts. She would often be working till 11 o'clock at night. Dad wasn't there. So that was my time to kind of explore my surroundings, shall we say. hang out with friends and whatnot. But yeah, he was not around for quite a long time. And I think when I think back, that was massive. I mean, again, credit to my mum, because I think she, at that moment in time, played the role of mum, dad, sibling, friend. She kind of tried to fill in all the gaps.
Your mom sounds like a superhero.
She's awesome. She really is. That's awesome. Amazing. And there's something beautiful about my mum in the sense that, again, I find or call myself fortunate in that I feel like I've had a really wholesome experience. So my mum's sister had Down syndrome. So from a young age, I was kind of aware of disabilities and people being different. She also had a friend who was gay, and again, coming from a culture where, you know, there's a lot of homophobic views. However, because that's all I ever knew, my mum's got a friend who's gay, who's been with her partner for decades.
Yeah.
It was beautiful because I was very much, there was very non-discriminatory views in my house, which was quite, I think, unusual for someone like me growing up in the Eastern world coming to Western world. You know, I luckily still had that. We're all the same, treat everyone the same, respect everyone, love everyone. So that was really nice. And I think that really helped me fit in, because actually when I was making new friends, it really didn't matter who you were, where you came from. We still...
That's huge.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. Yeah. And again, credit to your mom. That's amazing that she created that space to begin with.
Yeah.
Right?
And my dad too, because, you know, my dad is a man who's born and raised in Kashmir. However, he's always held really liberal views. He's always utterly respectful, and also he's always bigged my mum up as well, actually, when I think about it. You know, he supported her to integrate and feel at home in Pakistan, you know, and then when she was ready to go back, he said, come on then, that's fine, that's cool, let me do whatever I need to here, but you guys go, get settled in. And, you know, he's a man who sacrificed his all to be here with us, because obviously he eventually did move, and he's here now. And yeah, so when we were talking about podcasts, I was I'm gonna try not to get emotional, but
please feel welcome to.
I'm a very emotional person, you know, wear my heart on my sleeve.
Yeah.
When I interviewed my dad, I started off the podcast with saying the man who sacrificed his all for me, because it's true. You know, he was in his 40s. Imagine being in your 40s, coming to a country where you don't speak the language, you've left your friends, you've left your family, you've left a career where he could have been earning decent money, but he's come to a country because he's not used to the language and the culture. He's then had to work in factories and work in shops, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think when you come from like a white collar career where you're well respected and people are working for you, to then having to be working in a shop where he's being exposed to racism, discrimination, it's low paid. So he is very much also a man who, you know, has sacrificed his life.
Yeah. That's amazing. Now I want to interview your parents.
Come on, Lorraine and Nav, get on board.
Come on over. No, I mean, truly, it's that's beautiful. A beautiful expression of love and family. And just that, again, we're all humans. And like you've already expressed, what makes us similar is bigger than what makes us different.
Oh, 100%.
Because the differences are so surface compared to the depth of what makes us the same.
And I think traveling really, really brings that out, right?
Yes.
When you go and travel, but like really travel and see how the locals are living their life, you think we're all the same.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was doing I was doing a placement for my master's when I was studying to be a social worker, and I was working in quite a diverse area, and the children had all done some hand paintings and made it into a rainbow, and underneath it said something like, "Together we stand, divided we fall." And I was like, yeah, absolutely. United we stand and divided we fall. So I kind of take that along with me everywhere I go.
Yeah.
Because I think that's so significant in terms of humanity and being together. And it's a beautiful thing when kind of different cultures and people come together.
Right. Absolutely. And realizing that our cultures aren't the things that should divide us.
No, they're a part of us,
yeah,
but they're not entirely us.
No. And they shouldn't be the thing that draws those hard lines of separation. They should be the things that make us want to learn more about each other, but not the things that separate us from each other, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard.
It is really hard because not everyone's as open to learn, to be together, to open up our doors and hearts. Not everyone's that. So I think when, I come across people like yourselves who are open to have these chats, it's really, really refreshing. And I always say there's always more good people than bad, for sure. There's always, I think just once you reach out, people are more than willing to listen and also share their stories.
Yeah. There's so much of it is based in fear of the unknown. And that's not a justification, but I think, unfortunately, it's the truth. And it goes back to the bubble, right? If you only know what you have personally experienced, and that experience has existed in one singular place around people that all look and behave and think like you, then anything else very naturally is going to seem terrifying, especially the older you get, the longer you feel that way, right? And it is such a joy to know that the moment you step outside of that and experience and have an authentic experience outside of it, everything changes.
It does.
And there's so much life in that. And I there's nothing else like it.
Yeah. I have a best friend who we started work when she was 19. I was 18 at the time. And I don't think she really had she grew up in a really white, small town in the UK. So she wasn't really exposed to any others, in terms of anyone from a different race, religion, background. And when she first met me, and my sense of humor is a bit all over the place. And we got to know each other, and I've seen her journey from when we were in our late teens.
Yeah.
To now. She was with me over the weekend, actually, in our mid to late 30s. I see in that time, she's gone from not knowing anyone who's different to her to traveling all over the world. And now I see how much she's grown and developed, and the love that she has for different cultures. And it's really remarkable. It's amazing to see her kind of mixing in and speaking different languages. Oh, it's
good for her. She is above me then.
Oh, same.
Oh my gosh. I wish. I will say emphatically that travel is the best thing I've done for myself ever. It is the best education that I've ever gotten. It is the best gift I've given myself to experience new things, but to also grow as a person. It cannot be overstated how much travel has changed me. It has given me a confidence in myself that I've never had before. And a lot of it is because I've been doing solo travel and just having to figure things out. And listen, it's not been difficult. Like I'm traveling in the 2020s, right? Like I have a GPS on my phone. I am not struggling, but it's still
hard.
new. Yeah. So
now, see, I have also traveled to over 20 countries, but never solo traveling. That's something that's also on my list of my bucket list of 40 before 40. But there's something quite daunting about, even in this day and age, like you said, it's very accessible. Travel is, especially if you hold an American or British passport, you can go anywhere. It's not hard at all.
Yeah.
But there's something about, oh my gosh, solo traveling.
Yeah.
So hats off to anyone who does solo traveling and just gets up and goes out.
I love it. It is also terrifying sometimes. And not in the way that people think that it's like I'm scared of people or whatever, but I'm always just like nervous about my ability until I do it, right? And then like I'm always questioning like am I going to be able to figure out the public transportation and get where I need to be and just that idea too is like a woman having to remind myself that I am allowed to take up space and be places and just exist as a person, like that. So sometimes it can be difficult, but it's also, again, super rewarding. But I started traveling solo out of necessity. Like I wanted to go places and I didn't have anybody to go with.
Oh, good for you. That's fantastic. That's admirable.
I mean, it was like, it's either I'm going to do it this way or I'm not going to do it at all. And yeah. So
here you are in Manchester.
Here I am. Yeah, I think I've traveled more in the past like 3 years than I have in my entire life. And my bucket list before I turn 40, because we're the same age, is I want to get to 50 countries.
Oh, okay. And where are you up to right now?
So by the end of the summer, I will be at 29.
Oh, you've totally got this.
And like the last 15 have been in the last like 2-3 years. So I do have like I will be able to do it. But
you have a plan.
But I'm hearing about your bucket list. I need to put more things on mine. I want to put more things on my 40.
I tell
40.
everyone who's my age to have a bucket list going because when you tick it off, it's something to look forward to, something to plan. It's something to look back on and smile. I always have this motto of like living a full life with no regrets, living to the max and, having a pocket full of memories.
Yeah.
Not a pocket, a suitcase of memories.
Yes. A giant suitcase.
Yeah, a giant
overweight
suitcase of memories. Yes, an overflowing suitcase of memories. That's the kind of outlook I want to have on life.
I agree.
For sure.
I think it's wonderful. Anyway, I don't know why we got on. I don't know why I steered us there to talking about my travel.
No, but I do love travel. We could do a podcast on travel on its own. It's a beautiful, beautiful part of existence.
It truly is. Truly. So you are a social worker.
I am.
So what kind of brought you into that field of work?
So I do think it goes back to kind of my roots and seeing and just having that empathy. So again, maybe some of it's my mum and dad. If anyone in the immediate or extended family had any issues, my parents' house would be like the hub where we talk about things. And they were always kind of those people that would bring people together. And I saw that growing up and my kind of people pleasers too, They're always like the yes people who'll be there for people and do their bit in society. So maybe there was a bit of that in the background. So I did my degree because I was still trying to find my feet. So I did criminology and sociology as an undergrad university. Didn't really know what I wanted to do. So for 2 years, I worked with young people in a supported accommodation. I worked as an interpreter for a refugee charity. What else did I do? I did some volunteer work for victim support, supporting victims of crimes. And during that time, I realized that there's kind of a niche profession that I can get into. I can really help people and support people on a one-to-one. So then I went and did my master's and qualified in 2015.
It's amazing.
So 9 years of being qualified, and I love everything about it.
It's such I mean, I guess I can't speak to it in any other culture except American culture, but I imagine it's similar in that it is largely unappreciated work.
Yeah.
It is work that is never done and never has enough staff.
Underpaid, overworked.
Yeah.
High staff turnover, emotionally draining, all those things. But also, again, once you've got those human connections and you're making a difference, there's nothing quite like it in terms of reward and satisfaction.
Yeah.
You see it all as well, I think you have to be quite robust in your views and quite willing to take risks, but also it's really, really hard. It's really, really hard to know that people are suffering and there's systematic reasons for people to be in the positions that they're in.
Yeah.
Families where there's generational trauma in families, there's vicious cycles of drugs, alcohol, poor mental health, domestic abuse. And because of the lack of resources, how do you help these people? It's really, really quite tough. But when it works, that one case that stays with you, that one family, I feel like that sees you through your career, or at least that's my personal experience, dealing with, I can still think of 1-2 families where I think, I did my job right.
Yeah.
And I want to do it for the rest of my life, for sure.
How do you take care of yourself in those spaces?
Yes, so I did what we call safeguarding social work, where you deal with children and do case management and go to court and, at times having to remove children from their birth parents. So I did that for a couple of years. But then when I wanted to start my own family, I thought this isn't sustainable. We need to change it up a little because there's no way I have the emotional stamina to deal with this, because up until having children, I could work weekends, evenings, not have a social life, be on the verge of burnout. But actually, we're thinking about moving to Manchester at this point, and I'll go back to that.
Okay.
But moving back to Manchester, I was thinking new city, new people, new house. I can't do this. So then I kind of took a little bit of a change and went into fostering social work. So now my role is to supervise foster carers who look after children. In terms of dealing with it, I think the kind of service that I'm in at the minute, it's a really nice one because you see foster carers who are working relentlessly to make a difference in children's lives in a positive way. And obviously my role is just to make sure that they're okay to do that. And I think the kind of person I am, I'd like to think I'm quite nurturing and quite attuned to their needs, so I can be there for them and support them emotionally in whatever capacity I can. So I think it's quite a wholesome role. And of course, I don't switch off entirely when I get home, because there's still cases and children that I think about when I get home. But when you've got your own children, your own family to look after, you have to just switch off and implement some of those safe care strategies.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think having a really supportive husband, friends and parents really helps you to do that.
Sure.
So I feel like at this moment in time, I've figured it out and I've got a good balance in terms of work-life balance.
That's great.
I also work part-time, which is fantastic. I mean, I'm lucky enough that we can do that. But it's good to balance it out.
Yeah. There are certain professions that I just know it takes a toll on your emotional health as well as, just what work does in general. And so the sustainability of it and people get into this work to help people, and they usually get into it because they care, right? There's an empathy there. And so finding that balance is so important in that line of work, and being able to kind of create your boundaries and say, like, I need to take care of myself, first and foremost, because until I have that figured out, I'm not actually doing any good for anybody else. So that's awesome that you have really struck a great balance there, and that you have the support system to help you maintain that balance. I think that just makes a huge difference.
Yeah. I mean, it's not easy, but I think you have to be open to change. You have to be open to be flexible. Something's got to give, right? And I think it's figuring out what's got to give. Also, I'm a huge advocate of mental health and speaking about your feelings and emotions, figuring it out together. And I think that really helps. Mm-hmm. It really helps to navigate life in the best way possible, and saying to people, hey, I'm really struggling right now.
Right.
Have you got a minute? Do you fancy grabbing a coffee and going for a walk? And putting yourself out there. Really putting yourself out there. I think that really, really helps.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a conversation going on right now about toxic positivity, and just the idea that we can be, there is a power in positive thinking, right? There is a power in trying to not be negative and think badly all of the time, but there is a place for acknowledging where you are, your emotions, your feelings, and how things are affecting you, and to just pretend that things are great all of the time can be really toxic for us, right? So there's a power in positive thinking, but we can also take it too far.
Oh yeah, of course. I think it's really, really important to champion people who are raw and vulnerable in terms of their journeys, because actually we can learn from them. There's something that I've kind of come to find out about, which I think is quite liberating in a way. So we talk about post-traumatic stress, but also there's something about post-traumatic growth. Kind of traumatic events or things that you have grown from and strengthened from. And I think terminologies like those come to surface because we talk and we help and we support those people and we can learn from them. But it's not going to happen if we don't talk about it.
Absolutely.
So I'm all about, come on, let's talk about it.
Let's get there. Yeah. Let's, stop with the surface stuff. Yes, it doesn't really mean anything.
No, there's no time for that. Just be who you are and doors will open. Trust me. When you put yourself out there and you're raw and honest and vulnerable, doors will open somehow.
And at the end of the day, it's what connects us more than anything else. Yeah. Right? Like
we've known each other for what? I don't know how long it's been.
About an hour.
Yeah, about an hour. And there's so much we've already picked up from one another in our journeys. And that's all it takes, right?
Yeah.
An hour of time.
It's a commitment to just being present in a conversation and being willing to be open. I 100% agree. We don't, it doesn't, now, connections with people, you can have connections without giving, without crossing your own boundaries and without giving away yourself to the extent that you feel like you are diminishing, right? That you are giving away too much without receiving anything. And I think it's practice, right? We have to practice how we do that, how we kind of have conversations about where we are and who we are while maintaining our boundaries and being able to make connections in that way. You know, we could have met on the street and talked about the weather and left, and I never would have thought about you again, you know?
Yeah.
And as it stands, I will remember you and who you are, and I will call you friend. And, you know, it's
Likewise.
a beautiful thing.
And there's something so beautiful about meeting people on the bus, on the street, where you have a really wholesome conversation for, let's say, half an hour, an hour, and then you exchange numbers and you, again, have the boundaries in mind. You're not going to be BFFs.
Right.
Right? But you'll say, oh, if you're in the area, if you're around, let's grab a coffee.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
You know, oh, you're here, you're going to the theatre. Oh, I'll see you. I think there's something quite special about that too, where, you know, and it's just about networking and, yeah, like you said, the very basics of humanity.
But we've forgotten so much of it, or we've shut it out.
Don't you think podcasting's a way of bringing that back a little bit, right?
Yes. I can't express how the conversations that I've had over the past 2.5 years have just changed my life. The amount of people that I've spoken to that I never would have met, but also this has kind of given me a very easy access, and I don't mean that in a flippant way at all, but inviting people into conversation like this has been such a game changer, a life changer for sure.
Yeah. Because it makes you think in ways that wouldn't be possible otherwise.
Yeah.
You know, there's parts of our brains that are completely switched off because we're not having those conversations. But the more you have them, you think, oh, that's a way of thinking about things. Like toxic positivity, I won't lie. I hadn't heard of the term, but actually you've mentioned it. So I'll be going back and thinking, okay, what's all this about? But that's how we learn.
Absolutely, 100%.
So I'll be, talking about toxic positivity next time.
That's fabulous.
But that's what it's about. It's kind of learning from one another. And also, when I see independent, strong women solo traveling and doing their own thing, it's inspiring. I think there's something beautiful about sisterhood as well. For me personally, empowering women and bigging each other up and being like, yes, you've got this. Yes. Go do whatever. I've got you. I've got your back.
100%. Absolutely. I agree so much. I have met, most of the people that I've interviewed have been women, and I've had some fabulous men on the podcast and I adore them. They're great. But the women I have met through this, it's just been, I can't express the gift that it has been, truly.
Yeah, for sure. And I think since having my children, there's that pocket of women and mothers as well that I feel like have enhanced my life. Kind of that emotional support, because navigating motherhood is a topic in itself, because it changes a woman in terms of from when we give birth to raising children, that sense of responsibility that comes with it, and I think finding your tribe and your people isn't easy as you get older. Yeah, for sure.
There's, I'm not a mother, so I can only speak from somebody that views it from the outside. And it seems so much internal change, but there is an equal amount of external change. And that there's very few things I think that are like that. And where the external change is concerned, it's really polarizing, because from my perspective, in the same breath, you have there is a power and a value and a nobility almost in becoming a mother. But then there is also the same breath, like the complete opposite is also true. And how we hold those things together as, people is I don't understand how it exists.
It's a constant push and pull, isn't it?
It's completely paradoxical. Like, it doesn't make sense, actually, the way that we view mothers in a lot of ways, because we contradict ourselves all of the time.
Yeah. Be the best mum. Be caring and nurturing. Oh, but you need to have a career. Oh, but you also need to be, oh gosh, you've gained weight, you've got stretch marks, but also you need to go to the gym. What?
Yeah. But don't go to the gym too much, because then you're neglecting your kids.
Absolutely, of course. And if you're spending all this money on going to the gym, well, what about your children?
Right. You don't actually care about them.
No.
And motherhood is the hardest job that you'll ever have. But actually, you don't do anything. You stay home with your kids.
Going off on a tangent entirely here, but also, what about the mothers who haven't birthed children but want to be mothers and have... Anyways, it's a topic in itself that's very, very complex, really, really difficult to talk about. But by having these conversations, we're saying we see you, we hear you, we're here to back you up. When I moved to Manchester, I didn't have any friends here and I knew I wanted to start a family. So I kind of went out of my way to make friends, to befriend kind of people. So I was on Facebook, I was on Instagram, I was on these mum groups. And just yesterday, I had a get together at a spa with like 10 of my friends that I've made since moving to Manchester. And I don't normally do group things, but there was something about building this community in Manchester and bringing everyone together and just thanking them and letting them know that I appreciate them. But it's not easy, like being in your 30s, moving to a new city and building a community and a support system.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, it's not easy to put yourself out there. But if you do, don't be afraid to put yourself out there,
Yeah. Well, let's talk about it, because I know your journey to motherhood and after, becoming a mother has been difficult at points. So, you knew you wanted a family, and you started your family after you moved to Manchester, you said?
Yeah. So me and my husband had an arranged marriage. We were introduced by family. We only met twice in person.
Okay.
In the 3 years. And then we got married in Pakistan. And then we moved to Qatar for a year. So,
oh, wow.
Yes, lived in Qatar. That was an incredible experience. And then because he wasn't a British citizen, I had to come back to the UK, move to the Northeast, back in with my parents and apply for a spouse visa for my husband to come.
Okay.
So then we were in a long distance relationship. Just to give you a bit of context as to kind of my journey, I guess. So yeah, got married and did my master's 2015, right? Got married, moved to Qatar. I moved back to the UK. Me and my husband were in a long distance relationship, but we made the most of it. Even though he was in Qatar, we would meet every 3 months in a different country. So we traveled to Sri Lanka, we traveled to Morocco, and we traveled to Turkey, I think.
Ooh,
so we made the most of that time,
yeah.
right? And then eventually got his visa to come to the UK. And when he came, he was struggling to find good jobs in the Northeast. So at that moment in time, I was working in a really stressful safeguarding role as a social worker. And I was thinking, we're moving to Manchester. Okay, fine, let's do this. If that's where you want to go, we'll go there. So I remember in September 2017, I moved to Manchester on the Sunday. I was starting a new job on the Monday, and we were in a hotel at the time. It was all a lot. And I was thinking, gosh, like if we want to start a family in this new city, I don't know a single person. I need to put myself out there. It's not easy, but it's got to be done. I can't be here isolated. I'm a people person. I thrive on human connection and finding kind of that energy level. So I then kind of also I wanted to be a mum, which I knew wasn't going to be easy because obviously I've been working with children and families for years at this point. So I went to Facebook, I went to Instagram, and I just reached out to people and said, is there anyone around who wants to grab a coffee? Or do you know if there's any antenatal classes that I can go to? And slowly but surely, I made those connections and got pregnant. I found pregnancy really, really damn hard, really hard. You know, when people talk about being pregnant, say, oh, it's beautiful, you know, oh, what a journey. Oh, I did not feel any of that. I felt rotten for 9 months.
Yeah.
And then when I became a mum, first time in my life, I experienced anxiety. In my life, I had never really suffered with my mental health. Not really, but for the first time, I had intrusive thoughts, low self-esteem, struggling with confidence, really feeling out of my depth. It was really tough. And I think I don't think I ever spoke to anyone in an open way prior to experiencing it myself. And I really wish I had. I wish a mum had opened up to me prior to me having children, so I was somewhat aware of it, but I wasn't. All I had been told was, it's a beautiful thing, it's magical, it's this, it's that. But actually, pregnancy was awful. Giving birth was traumatic, to say the least. And then having a child to look after was even harder. So for the first time in my life, I started to experience from anxiety and just really awful negative thoughts that I didn't really want to accept or tell people that this is what's going on. So I suffered for about a year, I would say. And I think what made it really hard was that when my oldest son, Niall, when he was about 8 months, he had a severe allergic reaction. And I think, excuse me, I think that made me 10 times worse because, you know, allergies are life-threatening. And he was allergic to, this point, eggs, nuts, sesame.
Oh, wow.
So I would either avoid going to cafes and restaurants, or if I went, I was physically there. Mentally, I was completely elsewhere. I couldn't think straight. I felt sick. It was just awful. And I think navigating that part of my life has been super, super difficult. I think up until becoming a mum, I was really resilient and ready for change, and I'll adapt, I'll be flexible. I could put on a mask and hold myself together. But after becoming a mum, I could no longer do that. The cracks were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I thought, no, I need to kind of talk about this. And then I started, maybe it was some sort of a deflection or distraction. I started doing travel blogging, and I did have some therapy, but it wasn't very beneficial. I'm an advocate for therapy. I think everyone should go for therapy because we've all got traumas and experiences that we need to talk about. But I think finding the right therapist is like key.
Yeah.
And sadly, I did not find the right one. So I struggled. However, I must say, again, going back to my support system, my immediate family and friends, they really picked me up and carried me through. And I'm so grateful that I was intentional about making those connections, because my mama friends saw me through the highs and the lows, and I learned so much from them. You know, the basics of going out, packing your bags, and how you talk to, even though I'm a social worker and I should know this, when you have your own child, it's that bit tricky.
It's different. Yeah.
So I think I learned a lot from them, and perhaps they learned from me too, who knows. But I'm so pleased and so glad that I had that safety blanket of knowing people in the area at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been tough and it's still tough. I must say, of all the things I've been through in life, becoming a mum's been the hardest, because the unconditional love that you have is so significant that you can never quite switch off. Like, a part of your mind and heart and soul is elsewhere.
Yeah.
For sure.
I just appreciate your candor and vulnerability in that, because I think, again, I'm not a mom, but I have watched many of my friends and family walk through this experience, and I just have, as somebody that is looking from the outside in, but also has the experience of being a woman, I feel like I just have so much compassion for women that are trying to walk through this, and how it's again, it's kind of a contradiction, because on one hand we say it's the most natural thing in the world, it's been happening since the beginning of time. But on the other hand, there's so much nuance in it, and even though it's been happening for all of time, we as cultures and societies can still be so terrible at supporting women walking into motherhood.
Have you heard of the term that it takes a village to raise a child?
Yes.
We've lost that village.
Yes.
We're on our own. And I think being on your own is really, really hard, because the sleepless nights, the loneliness and the isolation that comes with it is really quite tricky. And I think I don't want to be entirely negative, because I feel like whilst I lost some of who I am, I feel like the strength that came with being a mum is incredible. Like, I'm riddled with anxiety now, but I've never been so sure of myself. I've never been more sure of my boundaries, my energy, and self-awareness. I've always had some element of self-awareness, but I think since becoming a mum, I really am more aware and attuned to what is that I need, what is it that I want. Because anyone who's not going to be there for my children, quite frankly, I do not want you in my life. And I think it speaks volumes in terms of the people that are around you, how they treat your children. So I feel quite passionate about that.
Yeah.
And I think it's really helpful to kind of be like, actually, they are part of me and not separate to me. So if you want to be a part of my life, you need to be a part of our life. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just think it's my way of really understanding my relation dynamics of who I want in my life and who I don't, but also kind of that different part of confidence, like this a kind of pride in being a mum and ownership of these are my children. And there's something really quite beautiful about that too.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but on the flip side of it, there's something really liberating about being a mum and the journey that you go through.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm more unapologetically myself. I'll say it how it is and I don't really care.
Yeah.
As long as I'm not hurting people or offending people.
Sure.
However, this is me, all of me. Like it or lump it, quite frankly.
There you go.
Yeah. Like, that is just kind of the attitude I have now, which is something that I wouldn't have had 5 years ago. I would have been like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll bend over backwards. If you say jump, I'll say how high. Whereas I'm like, no, I want to be with my family. And if it's not in my family's best interest, then I'm really sorry. I can't do it.
Yeah.
So it's been really helpful in that respect, you know.
Sure.
And it's still very much a journey. Still the highs and the lows.
Well, and I think too, we don't ever stay the same, or we shouldn't, right? And so we go through different seasons in our lives, and things change as we grow, as your children grow. You know, what you need in life or what you want out of life in your relationships will grow with you, right? And so I think too, it's important to just acknowledge that seasons come and go. And so like, it doesn't have to be permanent or all or nothing, but I think it's absolutely fair to say, like, in this season, I am incapable of meeting you in this place. And it's not because I don't love you or I don't respect where you are, but like, I have to draw my boundaries somewhere, right? Yeah. And so I think that it is such a liberating thought, though, to realize that almost nothing in life is permanent. And so just embracing where you are at the moment and then being okay with the ebb and flow as life moves, as you move through life and as things change and people grow and all of the things happen, right?
Mm. Change is inevitable, isn't it? It is inevitable. I think you put that so beautifully, because absolutely. Same with relationships, you know, if they become a bit stagnant, then there's time for change, right? Mm-hmm. You need to juice it up a little bit. Even with relationships, also in this phase of life, I realize not everyone's here to stay. Like you said, just like the seasons. Yeah. Some kind of people are here for the long run and some are here just for temporary basis. And that's okay. Yeah. That's absolutely okay. Let's just make the most of it here and now and see how it changes and evolves.
And it doesn't mean that those people that aren't here forever don't mean something to the season in your life that they're in, right? They can still have a lasting impact.
I read something the other day and it was really, really gorgeous. It said something like, to the friends who were once in my life and are no longer in my life actively, I still see you and the success that you are experiencing, the wedding that you've just had, the child that you've just given birth to, the new job. And I'm happy for you and I still love you. You were a huge part of my life and I still hold on to those memories and those experiences, but I wish you all the best. Yeah. And I think that's really, really nice to be able to leave certain relationships in a really healthy and amicable way. Because not all relationships need to end in a toxic manner or to be left in negativity.
Right. Or even necessarily have a final end, right? Yeah. You know, it's just we've grown apart or we've lost touch or we're just not in the same place and we're not seeing each other right now. I still consider you a friend. And if we were to see each other someday in the future, I would be very happy and welcome that with open arms, you know? And I think too, you know, speaking as somebody that doesn't have children, and you know, I could give a whole TED talk on this. Being a woman in her 30s that doesn't have children.
Oh gosh, I can imagine.
But, you know, kind of adopting the same feelings for myself too, that I have to make choices for myself and where I'm growing and going. And that, you know, a lot of my friends and family members have children. And it's not that I'm leaving them behind or like putting a hard, you know, end on, you know, I don't want to see you anymore because our lives don't mesh up. But, you know, I was just talking to my best friend last night. We were FaceTiming and she has 2 kids. We are completely opposite. She is like, thinks what I do is completely stressful and like wants zero part of it. But she is rooting me on and like one of my biggest cheerleaders. And I am the same with her. Like, I adore her children. We see each other when we can. And, you know, we catch up on each other's lives as best we can. And she's been my best friend since we were in 4th grade. So there will never be a time, you know, that I can see that is going to separate us. But we're not always physically able to be together. And that's okay. And I had to come to a place that said, I have to make decisions based on what is going to be best for my life and not try to fit myself in to other people's lives because I can be more flexible, right? So I had to kind of take away that almost overly people pleasing, like, yeah, sure, I can be available anytime, anywhere. And there are times when I do that because it's important for me to see and be there for people that are in my, close circle. But there are also times where I say, sorry, I can't be there. I'm going to be in England, or wherever it is, whatever I'm doing. And there's been such a beautiful, I've really found some amazing confidence and just love of life through choosing to make those decisions,
I don't know about you, but there's something about being in my mid-30s that I absolutely love. And that is exactly it. So remember the friend that I was working with in my late teens? She's one of my best friends. She is in her mid to late 30s. She's single. She lives hundreds of miles away. She's entirely different to me, entirely different. However, I love the bones of her. We're there for each other. We're not in each other's pockets. We see each other when we can. The way she loves my children makes me love her 10 times more. And there's something really beautiful about loving each other regardless of whether we're 1 mile away or hundreds of miles away.
Yes.
And just knowing that we are there for each other.
Yeah. And I think, finding the balance because I do believe in the value of community and I do believe in it takes a village. I think that is an expression of how we were meant to live together. And so I realize that especially in the West, our expression of hyper individuality can be very damaging. So I think it's important to walk this tightrope too of realizing like I need to make decisions that are for me, that will, help me to grow. In the same breath, all of my decisions can't be based in what is going to make me as an individual flourish. I have to also take in the larger picture as well, right? And so I think that's part of growth in general too, is realizing that both of those things can coexist and that boundaries exist within community and that it would be really unhealthy to just throw yourself in all the time. And listen, I'm a people pleaser by nature, so I get it wrong a lot.
Me too. It's very much a learning process. But when you mention the village, it's changed. However, we are so lucky that we have technology because the village is so accessible and it's at the end of our fingertips.
Yeah.
Like our village might not be here physically, but actually it's not that far away. WhatsApp, Instagram, the connections look a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I think you can lose them entirely, but you can also keep a close tab on all your connections via the beautiful thing called the internet.
Yeah.
The power of the internet. And I think I loved what you said earlier. I think sometimes we grow together and sometimes we grow apart. But I think if it can be done in a respectful manner, I think it's really, really nice to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody's on their own journey. And, going back to what you said about there are more good people than bad, I genuinely believe that most people are doing the best that they can with what they have in the current moment. And sometimes that means that they're not in a good place. And so it doesn't look like the best. But I have to believe that people, just because of the way that I feel about other human beings, and not, the circle of people I love, but then just the wider humanity, I think we are so built for connection and compassion. And when we lose sight of that, I think that, we're in our we're going through it, but that doesn't mean that you're bad or that you don't want the best for people. And again, I think people are, generally speaking, doing the best that they can at the moment.
I agree. You can only deal with the cards that have been given to you. And I always think I can't change people or things or situations. What I can change is how I behave, how I carry myself, what I represent. And if I'm doing that well, then I guess that's all I can do. I can't speak for people, but I'm always open and ready for human connection, for open communication, for transparency, and just to put my shoulder out for people to lean on. I can do my bit. And like you said, everyone's in their own journey. I think personal growth and development is so individual. But I think what's lovely is that you can be on your own journey and respect the person next to you on their journey. Yeah. I was saying this to a friend. I said, what I love is that you can all be in different lanes, doing your own thing, and just not trying to get into each other's lanes, just rooting each other on, and that visual of everyone's in their own lanes, doing their own thing. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's absolutely fine.
All moving forward.
What are we going to learn if we're all exactly the same?
Right.
In order for us to learn, we need to be different. We need to be individual.
Absolutely. And I think, we also have to say, if we can understand that people come to where they are in life, again, I'll say most people come to where they are in life in good faith, understanding where somebody is coming from and why they think the things that they do and why they behave the way that they do can be such a integral part of seeing the humanity in other people. And it doesn't mean that we have to be best friends with everybody. We shouldn't be. That's not sustainable. But it can mean that we're able to view other people as people and not as their ideas and their thoughts, right? Because if we can understand at the core of somebody that they are doing the best that they can with the information and the knowledge and the experience that they have, then maybe we can have some compassion and grace for where they are, even if we don't agree with each other.
Yeah, we don't have to agree on everything. Like I said, my best friend is entirely different to me. Her values are different, completely different upbringing. But I think it's so fulfilling to have different people bringing different vibrance in your life. And I think you can hold different views, but still love each other the same. Mm-hmm. I think you can just be respectful and, I think the concept of non-discriminatory, I kind of hold that quite close to me, as in I can have my values, you've got your values, it might be different to me, but that's okay. Mm-hmm. I can still respect your values. You don't have to respect mine. And I think if we all kind of chose that kind of mentality, there would be a sense of unity and harmony. And I do feel, I think what you said, that people do come in good faith and they are trying their best given the knowledge that they have and what access they have. But again, if I reach out and can do my bit to integrate and be like, hey, how's it going? That's what I can do, right? That's what we can all do.
Absolutely. I also think that's where change happens. If you are going to affect change in someone's life, it's going to be from a place of compassion and grace, not from a place of retribution and censure, right?
Yeah.
And that's not to say that you can't have your principles and think that it's not to say you can't have your principles, but I do think generally speaking, there is more happening through conversation and relationship and the extension of friendship than the division, the us versus them type of mentality that we are wont to do, right? Like, I mean, I think it's just, there is a part of us that is very able to draw those lines in the sand, but we don't have to.
I think what's beautiful is that you see so many more interracial couples and families and blended families. And I think that is the most beautiful thing about being here where we are. You know, I'd like to think that I'm raising children who'd know that it's okay to do whatever you want and be whoever you want. Like, I'm right here, right behind you, as long as you're kind and compassionate. And, you know, I think there's been a generational change as well, hasn't it? I think internet's been huge in bringing people together. Yes, there's tiny pockets, I'd like to think, of people that are a bit more divided, that cause hatred and everything else. But there's also a huge part of people that want to raise awareness and bring people together and learn from each other. And I think if we access it the right way, we can really thrive as individually as well as society, really.
Yeah. Beautiful. I feel like we could just keep talking about this.
Right? Yes, me too. I mean, I love people. I love their stories. I guess I'm a social worker for that reason. And that's why I probably started the podcast, because I could listen to people all day. It's my favorite thing to do all day.
Well, I think then you're in the right space.
I think we are, right?
Yeah. So I do have a question that I ask everybody at the end of every episode.
Okay, go for it.
So, through the lens of your experience, what does compassion mean to you?
I think compassion for me is treating others how I'd like to be treated. That's how I see compassion. Really simple. It's how I'd want to be treated, how I'd want to be respected, how I'd want to be spoken to. Yeah, really simple. Doesn't need to be complicated, doesn't need to be deep.
Yeah.
But I think it's just the core of who we are and how we exist, just to treat others how you want to be treated.
I mean,
I don't know if that answers your question.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. First of all, there's no wrong answer.
I was thinking, but no, as soon as you said it, that's what came to my mind was
That's perfect.
How I'd want to be treated. Yeah.
I mean, I think that more than anything, and what doing this podcast has taught me, is that above all else, people just want to be seen and understood. And if we can receive people with in a space of just openness and without judgment, before we get to know them, before we get to understand them, I mean, just how much better would things be if we could truly practice that receiving?
Yeah, and I think creating safe spaces, I'm realizing the older I get how important that is. And maybe that stems from like my children, allowing them to have a safe space to say what they need to without consequences. Do the same with adults. Allow people to have a safe space to talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, I really appreciate it. I think there's something quite beautiful about meeting someone from a different continent and getting really deep and just meeting on a real basic humanity level. Thank you for your time.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being vulnerable.
Yeah.
It is the best gift I think we can give each other in a lot of ways, is just our raw stories and things that we're able to relate to with each other. Again, just echoing the idea that we're more similar than we are different.
Absolutely. And I think you are clearly compassionate and kind and welcoming. And, within an hour of you created this safe space for me to be raw and vulnerable, because actually you can't just open up to people who are not willing to listen.
Sure.
So, no, I appreciate you and your time and for allowing me to share a little bit of me, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. Well, what is the name of your podcast?
It is called Tasha's Tales, the podcast.
Okay. Well, we'll link to it in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hopefully people can hear some more stories.
Yeah, fabulous. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Human Experience. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, share it with your friends and family, share it on social media, and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also support the podcast financially by going to my website, thehxpod.com, linked in the show notes, and clicking on Donate. It takes a lot of time and resources to create this podcast, so every little bit helps. Everyone has a story, and I'd love to hear yours. So be sure to check out the show notes for more information about how to stay in touch. Do good and love well.